Well, first, I want to say just the insanity of having a senator, a candidate for vice president, and a former president, and now a candidate for president, really talking about memeing into reality a racist, conspiracy, dangerous story like this. What it means is that there are so many people now who are looking for stories to make this true. And it gins up this dangerous reaction by folks who are unstable, in which then they go and try to protect these animals that they think that are being attacked by Haitian immigrants and cause harm to people who are already vulnerable, who came to this country seeking stability and safety and coming from situations that were already volatile. And I think, when we think about the bigger picture, is thinking about what kind of country do we want to be, right? Is this the kind of rhetoric and messaging that we want the world to see about who our leaders are and those, that could potentially be elected into the highest leadership in our office and in our country? And I think what Harris did so well last night was remind the American people that this manic, dangerous liar cannot be reelected as president of the United States, and how crucial it is for us not to go back to the dark and dangerous days of the Trump presidency.
I imagine you weren't surprised by that last night. And just as we look at this overall, Trump last night was talking about Harris and calling her this very liberal nominee, talking about how radical she is. He called her a Marxist, I believe, last night on stage. He's certainly called her that before. She's actually moved to the center on a lot of her policy positions that she held when she was running against Senator Cory Booker in the Dem primary and others in 2019. What did you make of that? I mean, would you classify her as that? How would you describe her politics as they stand now?
Well, I did love the fact that she wasn't him, right? She didn't take the bait, and that she stood her ground and she explained where she was on policy in 2020, where she has evolved in her policies, what that means for the American people. The one thing that I think I've always really appreciated about Vice President Harris and our vice presidential candidate, my governor, Tim Walz, is that they've always been the kind of public servants that listen to the people, to the constituents that they serve and those that they seek to serve, and implement policies that are coming from those people. And I think that is the kind of leadership that the American people are looking for, people who are willing to listen to the issues that are important, not just to voters, but to every constituency in the country, and make decisions that are going to make their lives better.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's really important constituencies in places like your home state and Michigan and others. There wasn't a lot of time spent on the Israel-Hamas war that is underway last night between the two candidates. But when they did talk about it, despite Trump saying that Israel would cease to exist if Harris was elected, they largely agree on the policy of that, of supporting Israel and backing it. On a ceasefire hostage deal, she said that she would work around the clock, but she didn't offer any specifics on what that would look like. Was that enough of a plan in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is I believe there is a great appreciation in the empathy and compassion that she offers. But I do believe that voters, both in my district and in Minnesota and across the country, that care, want to actually see either an implementation of a ceasefire or an actual concrete answer to how we get a ceasefire and why we have not been able to utilize the leverage that we have in order for that ceasefire to be implemented.
And of course, I assume by that, in part, you mean sending arms and weapons to Israel, which is something, we keep hearing.
Tangible actions that could be taken, right? We are supplying the weapons that are causing the catastrophe. And so, to say you're working around the clock and not, take any actionable steps that the voters and the American people can see makes that rhetoric really hard to swallow.
And is that, that was her rhetoric last night. And so when you hear about the implementation of a ceasefire deal, we hear all the time from the administration, take it or leave it is on the table, take it or leave it is on the table. I talked to the Israeli ambassador to the UN last week. He said the idea of a ceasefire being close is just not realistic at this moment.
Yeah. And I think that is where it does feel disingenuous, right? Because we hear our Secretary of State Blinken, who has now traveled to Israel, I believe, 11 times, who makes these statements as he's departing the country for Egypt, and says we are, very close, a deal has been reached. Bibi Netanyahu is there. And then we see the humiliation that follows as Bibi takes the stage right after he departs and says, there is no such thing. And I think for a country that is not only considered as a leader in the world, but a country that is directly in support in supplying these weapons to Israel to not do that after the first time that they backtracked on what they promised us, not do that on the second time, not do that on the third time. Now, 11 months in, I think it is starting to sound like this is not a serious thing that our secretary is working on.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, thank you for joining us here on The Source.
Yeah, I appreciate it.